The house on Maple Street burned with secrets, its walls whispering truths no one dared speak. Claire Hansen, a widow with a heart too big for her quiet life, had filled it with 5 adopted sons, each a spark of chaos, each a piece of her soul. But tonight, as the summer air hung heavy, something was about to break. Claire stood at the kitchen counter, her hands trembling as she sliced apples for a pie no one would eat. The clock ticked past midnight, and the house was too still. Her boys Ethan, Caleb, Noah, Lucas, and Sam were grown now, scattered across their 20s. But they'd come home to Willow Creek, Ohio, for the annual family reunion. She'd raised them from broken beginnings, piecing together a family from foster care's wreckage. Each boy had been a battle won, a promise kept. But tonight, the weight of their pasts felt like a storm gathering. Ethan, the eldest at 28, burst through the screen door first, his boots heavy on the hardwood. "Ma, we need to talk," he said, his voice sharp, eyes blazing with something raw. Behind him, Caleb and Noah followed, their hands clasped tightly, a silent declaration. Claire's knife paused mid-slice. She'd always known her boys were different, fierce, tender, defiant in their own ways, but this was new. The air crackled with unspoken words. "Ethan, what's going on?" Claire's voice was steady, but her heart raced. She set the knife down, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes flicking between her sons. Lucas and Sam lingered in the doorway, their faces unreadable, but the tension was palpable. Something had shifted, and Claire felt it like a fault line under her feet. "We're done hiding," Caleb said, stepping forward, his voice softer but no less resolute. At 25, he'd always been the quiet one, the poet who wore his heart in his sketches. Noah, a year younger, squeezed his hand, his jaw set. "Noah and I, we're together. Have been for a while." Claire's breath caught. She'd seen the way they looked at each other, the way they lingered in each other's space. But she'd never pressed. Love was love, and she'd taught her boys to embrace it. But the intensity in their eyes now wasn't just about coming out, it was something deeper, something that made her stomach twist. "And me," Ethan added, his voice low, almost a growl. "I'm gay too. Been with someone for months. I didn't want to tell you like this." But he trailed off, glancing at Caleb and Noah, then back at Claire. "We're not ashamed. Not anymore." Claire's heart swelled and ached at once. Pride battled with a creeping unease she couldn't name. She stepped forward, pulling all 3 into a fierce hug. "I love you. All of you. Always." Her voice cracked, but she meant every word. She'd fought for these boys through courtrooms, nightmares, and their own demons. Nothing would change that. But as she held them, Lucas cleared his throat from the doorway. "There's more, Ma," he said, his voice tight. At 23, Lucas was the skeptic, always watching, always questioning. Sam, the youngest at 21, stood beside him, his eyes wide with something like fear. "We found something. About us. About where we came from." Claire's arms fell to her sides. The room felt too small, the air too thin. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas pulled a folded envelope from his pocket. Its edges worn. The paper yellowed. This was in the attic. Hidden in one of your old boxes. It's about our adoption papers. And it's not what you told us. Claire's blood ran cold. She'd buried those papers years ago. Locked them away with memories she'd sworn never to revisit. The boys were hers. Legally. Lovingly. Completely. But the truth, the full truth, had always been a shadow she couldn't outrun. What's in it? She asked, though she already knew. Her voice trembled, betraying her. Lucas's eyes locked on hers, hard and searching. It says 3 of us, Ethan. Caleb. And no parent, just adopted. We're brothers. Biological brothers. And you knew. The room spun. Claire gripped the counter. Her knees weak. The secret she'd guarded for 20 years was out, clawing its way into the light. She'd adopted 5 boys. Yes. But 3 shared a bond she'd never disclosed, a bond tied to a past so dark it could tear them apart. Ma. Noah said, his voice breaking. Why didn't you tell us? Claire opened her mouth, but no words came. The truth was a blade, and it was about to cut deeper than she'd ever feared. Claire's kitchen, once a haven of laughter and spilled flour, felt like a courtroom now. The envelope lay on the table, a silent accuser, its contents threatening to unravel the family she'd built. Her 5 boys stared at her, their eyes a mix of betrayal, confusion, and desperate need for answers. I didn't lie to you, Claire began, her voice fragile but resolute. She sank into a chair, her hands clasped tightly to stop their shaking. I didn't tell you everything. I thought I was protecting you. Ethan's jaw tightened. Protecting us from what? The truth. That we're brothers. His voice was sharp, cutting through the stillness. He paced the kitchen, his broad frame casting restless shadows on the walls. You let us grow up thinking we were strangers. Ma. Why? Claire's gaze dropped to the table, to the envelope Lucas still held. She remembered the day she'd hidden it, the weight of its secrets too heavy for her boys to carry. It wasn't that simple, she said. Your past, it's complicated. Painful. I wanted you to have a future without it. Caleb, still holding Noah's hand, leaned forward. Then tell us now. All of it. His voice was softer than Ethan's, but there was steel beneath it. Noah nodded, his eyes glistening. We deserve to know who we are. Claire took a deep breath, the memories flooding back like a river breaking a dam. You 3, Ethan. Caleb. Know you were born to the same mother, a woman named Sarah. She was troubled, addicted. She couldn't care for you. The words tasted bitter, but Claire pressed on. When I met you, Ethan was 6, Caleb was 3, and Noah was just a baby. You'd been separated in foster care, bounced around like you didn't belong anywhere. I couldn't let that happen. I took you all in, fought for you. But Sarah, she didn't want you to know her, or what she'd done. What she'd done. Noah's voice was barely audible, his hand tightening around Caleb's. What does that mean? Claire hesitated, her heart pounding. She gave you up for a reason. Not just because of her addiction. There was someone else. A man. Your father. He was dangerous. She swallowed hard, the words catching in her throat. I promised Sarah I'd keep you safe. That meant keeping you from him and from the truth. Lucas, who'd been silent, slammed the envelope onto the table. This says more than that. Ma. It says our adoptions weren't legal. Not entirely. There's a name in here, James Carver. Who is he? Claire's blood froze. James Carver. A name she'd buried alongside the papers. Alongside her fear. He was your mother's husband. Your father. A violent man. He didn't want you boys. Not really. But he didn't want anyone else to have you either. When I adopted you, I had to bend the rules to make sure he could never find you. Sam, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up, his voice trembling. So you lied to us. All of us. Even me and Lucas. His eyes, wide and wounded, searched Claire's face. What else are you hiding? The question hung in the air, heavy as the summer heat. Claire wanted to reach for him, for all of them, but the distance between them felt like a chasm. I didn't lie to protect myself, she said, her voice breaking. I did it to protect you. All of you. From him. From the pain of knowing. Ethan stopped pacing, his eyes locking on hers. You don't get to decide what we can handle. Not anymore. He turned to his brothers. We need to find out who this James Carver is. If he's still out there. We need to know. Noah shook his head, his voice soft but firm. I don't care about him. I care about us. About why you kept this from us. Ma. We're a family. Or at least I thought we were. The words cut deeper than Claire expected. She stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You are a family. My family. Nothing changes that. Not the truth. Not the past. Nothing. But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her. The boys were pulling away, their trust fraying like an old rope. Caleb stood, pulling Noah with him. We need time, he said, his voice steady but distant. To process this. To figure out what it means. He glanced at the envelope, then at Claire. But we're not done talking about this. As they left the kitchen, Claire felt the weight of their absence. Lucas and Sam stayed behind, their silence louder than words. The envelope sat between them, a Pandora's box of secrets. Claire knew this was only the beginning. The truth about James Carver, about Sarah, about the adoption sit was a storm that would test them all. The next morning, Willow Creek buzzed with the lazy hum of summer. But inside Claire's house, the air was thick with tension. The boys had barely spoken at breakfast, their eyes avoiding hers, their forks scraping plates in silence. Claire felt like a stranger in her own home, the family she'd built slipping through her fingers like sand. Ethan was the first to break the quiet, pushing his plate away. I'm going to find him, he said, his voice low but unyielding. James Carver. If he's our father, I want to know who he is. What he's done. His eyes flicked to Caleb and Noah, who sat across the table, their hands still intertwined. You with me? Caleb hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of his coffee mug. I don't know. Ethan. What's the point? He's not part of us. Not like Ma is. His voice was soft, But there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, a need to understand the blood that tied them together. Noah, always the peacemaker, squeezed Caleb's hand. I'm with Caleb. I don't care about some guy who didn't want us. But, he glanced at Claire, who sat at the head of the table, her face pale. I want to know why you thought we couldn't handle it. Ma. Why you hid it? Claire's throat tightened. She wanted to tell them everything about Sarah's desperate pleas, about James's rage, about the night she'd driven across state lines to finalize their adoptions in secret. But the words felt like shards of glass. I was scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Not just of him, of losing you. If he'd found out, he could have taken you away. Lucas, who'd been scrolling on his phone, looked up sharply. Taken us. Ma. We were kids. He didn't want us. Why would he care now? Because he's not the kind of man who lets go, Claire said, her voice trembling. James Carver wasn't just violent. He was obsessive. He thought you boys were his property. When I took you in, I made sure he couldn't find you. Changed your names. Your records. Everything. Sam, who'd been picking at his toast, frowned. Changed our names. So, I'm not Sam. Lucas isn't Lucas. His voice cracked, and Claire's heart broke at the confusion in his eyes. You're Sam, she said fiercely. You're all exactly who you are. I gave you new names to keep you safe, not to change who you are. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his face clouded with doubt. Ethan stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not waiting for answers. I'm finding him. He grabbed his jacket, his movements sharp, determined. Caleb. Noah. You coming or not? Caleb and Noah exchanged a glance, their bond unspoken but unbreakable. We'll go, Caleb said finally, standing. But not for him. For us. To understand. Claire's stomach churned as she watched them leave, the screen door slamming behind them. Lucas and Sam stayed, but the silence between them was heavy. She knew they were searching for answers too, in their own way. Lucas was already back on his phone, his fingers flying across the screen, digging into public records, old news articles, anything that might mention James Carver. By noon, Ethan, Caleb, and Noah were in Ethan's old pickup truck, driving toward Cleveland, where Lucas had found a Leda prison record from 10 years ago listing James Carver as an inmate. The drive was tense, the radio off, the only sound the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of Caleb's sketchbook as he drew to calm his nerves. You think he's still there? Noah asked, his voice quiet, his head resting against the window. Doubt it, Ethan said, his eyes fixed on the road. Records said he was released 5 years ago, but someone there might know where he went. Caleb's pencil paused. What if he's normal now? People change, right? Ethan snorted. Guys like that don't change. Ma said he was dangerous. I believe her. Noah reached for Caleb's hand, their fingers lacing together. Then why are we doing this? If he's as bad as she says, what's the point? Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. Because I need to see him. Need to know why she's so scared. Why she lied. The prison loomed on the horizon, a gray fortress against the Ohio sky. Inside, they found a clerk who remembered James Carver, a hulking man with a temper. Released early for good behavior, but with a warning to stay clear of Willow Creek. The clerk handed them an address, scribbled on a scrap of paper. "He's in Toledo now," she said. "But be careful. He's not the kind you mess with." As they climbed back into the truck, Ethan stared at the address, his jaw set. Caleb and Noah sat in silence, their hands still clasped, their hearts heavy with the weight of what they might find. The road ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear: the truth about James Carver would change everything. Toledo was a maze of faded brick buildings and cracked sidewalks, the kind of city that held its secrets close. Ethan's truck rumbled down a street lined with pawn shops and diners. The address from the prison clerk clutched in his hand. Caleb sat in the passenger seat, sketching furiously, his pencil carving out the shape of a man he couldn't yet imagine. Noah leaned against him, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar streets, his heart a tangle of hope and dread. "This feels like a mistake," Noah said, his voice low. "What if he's worse than Ma said? What if he wants something from us?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. "Then we deal with it together." His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white on the wheel. He'd always been the protector, the one who stood between his brothers and the world. But this was different. This was blood. They pulled up to a rundown apartment complex, its paint peeling like old skin. The address led them to a second-floor unit, the door chipped and unmarked. Ethan knocked, the sound sharp in the quiet hallway. No answer. He knocked again, harder, his heart pounding. Caleb and Noah stood behind him, their breaths shallow, their hands still linked. The door creaked open, revealing a man in his late 50s, broad-shouldered but gaunt, his eyes shadowed with years of hard living. James Carver. His hair was graying, his face lined, but there was something in his stare, something sharp, predatory, that made Ethan's skin crawl. "You lost." James's voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. Ethan squared his shoulders. "We're looking for James Carver." "You him?" The man's eyes narrowed, flicking over the three of them. "Who's asking?" "I'm Ethan. These are my brothers, Caleb and Noah." Ethan's voice was steady, but his heart raced. "We're your sons." James froze, his hand tightening on the doorframe. For a moment, the air was thick with silence, the weight of 20 years pressing down. Then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Sons, you think you're mine. Sarah's boys." He shook his head, stepping back. "You got the wrong guy." Caleb stepped forward, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. "We have papers. Adoption records. They say you're our father." James's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "Papers don't mean shit. Sarah was a liar. Always was. If you're hers, you're nothing to me." Noah flinched, his hand squeezing Caleb's. "Then why did Ma Claire hide us from you? Why go through all that trouble?" James's gaze sharpened, and for a moment, Ethan saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "Claire Hansen." He spat. "That woman stole you. Thought she could play hero, keep you from me. But I didn't want you then. And I don't want you now. Ethan's fists clenched. Then why'd she change our names? Why'd she hide the truth? James smirked, leaning against the doorframe. Because she knew I'd come for you. Not because I cared, but because I could. She was scared of me. Still is. I bet. The words hit like a punch. Ethan took a step forward, his voice low. You don't get to talk about her like that. She's our mother. You're nothing. James's smirk faded, replaced by something colder. You think you know her. Ask her about the night she took you. Ask her what she did to Sarah. Caleb's voice trembled. What does that mean? What did she do? But James just shook his head, stepping back into his apartment. Figure it out yourselves. I'm done here. The door slammed shut, leaving the brothers in the dim hallway, their questions unanswered, their hearts heavier than before. Back in Willow Creek, Claire sat with Lucas and Sam, the envelope still on the table between them. Lucas had found more court records, a restraining order, a police report from 20 years ago. Sarah had died, not from addiction, but from a fight with James. A fight Claire had witnessed. The report didn't say Claire was involved, but it hinted at something she'd never told them. Ma, Lucas said, his voice hard. Did you know how Sarah died? Were you there? Claire's face paled, her hands trembling. I tried to help her. I swear. But James was too much. I couldn't save her. Sam's eyes widened, his voice barely a whisper. But you saved us. Right. Claire nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I did. I had to. But it cost me. It cost me everything. As the brothers drove back from Toledo, and as Claire sat with Lucas and Sam, the pieces of their past were falling into place. But the truth was far from complete, and the shadow of James Carver loomed larger than ever. The drive back from Toledo was a storm of silence and simmering anger. Ethan gripped the wheel, his mind replaying James Carver's words, each one a splinter under his skin. Caleb stared at his sketchbook, his pencil unmoving, while Noah leaned against the window, his eyes tracing the blur of Ohio fields. They'd gone looking for answers, but all they'd found was a man who didn't care in a question that burned hotter than ever. What had Claire done? Back at the house, Claire sat with Lucas and Sam, the kitchen table a battlefield of half-truths. The police report Lucas had dug up lay open, its words stark and accusing. Sarah's death hadn't been an accident. Not entirely. A fight with James. A fall. A head injury. Claire had been there. A witness. But the report was vague about her role. Had she fought back? Had she run? Or had she done something worse? Ma, Lucas said, his voice low but steady. You need to tell us everything. No more secrets. What happened with Sarah? Claire's hands shook as she poured herself a glass of water, the liquid trembling in the glass. I wanted to save her, she said, her voice barely audible. Sarah was my friend. We met at a support group for foster parents. She was trying to get clean, to get you boys back. But James, she paused, her eyes distant. He wouldn't let her go. He controlled her, hurt her. That night, I went to her apartment to help her pack, to get her out. But he came home. Sam leaned forward, his voice small. What happened then? Claire's eyes filled with tears. He was drunk, raging. He hit her, and she fell, hit her head on the counter. I tried to stop him, to pull him off her, but it was too late. She was gone. Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. I called the police, but James ran. They ruled it an accident, but I knew it wasn't. I knew he'd come for you boys if he found out you were with me. Lucas's eyes narrowed. So you took us, changed our names, hit us. Claire nodded, her tears falling onto the table. I had to. The system would have split you up, sent you back to him. I couldn't let that happen. Sam's voice was barely a whisper. But why lie to us? Why not tell us we were brothers? Because I didn't want you to carry that pain, Claire said, her voice raw. Your mother's death, your father's violent deceit was too much. I wanted you to be free, to be mine, to be a family. The screen door slammed, and Ethan, Caleb, and Noah stormed in, their faces a mix of anger and exhaustion. Ethan tossed the scrap of paper with James's address onto the table. He's a bastard, he said, his voice tight. Didn't want us. Said you stole us. Said to ask you what you did to Sarah. Claire froze, her heart stopping. What I did, she whispered. Noah stepped forward, his eyes searching hers. He said you weren't just a witness. He said you had something to do with her death. Claire's breath hitched, and for a moment, the room was silent, the weight of their stares crushing her. I didn't kill her, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I loved Sarah. I tried to save her, but I failed, and I've carried that guilt every day since. Caleb's sketchbook fell to the floor, pages splaying open. Then why does it feel like you're still hiding something? He asked, his voice breaking. Why does it feel like we don't know you at all? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Claire wanted to reach for them, to pull them close, but the distance between them was growing. The truth was unraveling, and with it, the family she'd fought so hard to build. That night, the brothers gathered in the living room. The envelope and police report spread out before them. Ethan paced, his anger a live wire. Caleb and Noah sat close, their hands still linked, their love a quiet anchor. Lucas scrolled through his phone, digging deeper, while Sam stared at the floor, lost in his own thoughts. We need to know the whole story, Ethan said, his voice resolute. Not just Ma's version, not just James's. The truth. Lucas looked up, his eyes sharp. There's a social worker mentioned in the report. Ellen Ramsey. She handled our case back then. She might know something. Noah nodded, his voice soft. Then we find her. We keep going until we know everything. As the brothers planned their next move, Claire sat alone in her bedroom, the weight of her choices pressing down. She'd saved her boys, but at what cost? The truth was coming, and it would either bind them closer or tear them apart forever. The search for Ellen Ramsey took the brothers to Columbus, where the retired social worker lived in a modest condo overlooking the Scioto River. The drive was long, the truck filled with the weight of unspoken questions. Ethan drove, his eyes fixed on the horizon, while Caleb and Noah sat in the back, their hands clasped, their love a quiet defiance against the uncertainty. Lucas and Sam had stayed behind, promising to keep digging through records. But the rift between them and Claire was growing, a silent wound no one knew how to heal. Ellen Ramsey was in her 60s, her hair a soft silver, her eyes sharp despite the years. She welcomed the brothers into her living room, her face clouding with recognition as Ethan explained who they were. "Sarah's boys," she said softly, her voice heavy with memory. "I always wondered what happened to you." "We need to know about our mother," Ethan said, his voice steady but urgent. "And about Claire. What really happened back then?" Ellen sighed, settling into an armchair, her hands folding in her lap. Sarah was a fighter, but she was broken. Addiction, abuse, she was trapped. When I met her, she was desperate to keep you boys. But James made it impossible. He was terrifying, controlling, violent. The night she died, I was the one who placed you in emergency foster care." Caleb leaned forward, his sketchbook open but untouched. "What about Claire? How did she end up with us?" Ellen's eyes softened. Claire was Sarah's lifeline. She'd been helping her for months, trying to get her clean, to get her away from James. When Sarah died, Claire begged to take you boys. She wasn't even approved as a foster parent yet, but she fought for you, pulled strings, called in favors. The adoptions weren't entirely by the book, but I helped her. I knew James would come for you if he could." Noah's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "So Claire lied to protect us." Ellen nodded. "She changed your names, moved you to Willow Creek, kept you off the grid. James was in and out of jail, but he was obsessive. He'd made threats, said you boys were his. Claire did what she had to do to keep you safe." Ethan's jaw tightened. "But what about Sarah's death? James said Claire had something to do with it." Ellen's face darkened. "He's lying. Or twisting the truth. Claire was there. Yes. But she didn't hurt Sarah. She tried to save her. The police report was vague because James intimidated everyone witnesses. Cops. Claire was terrified he'd come after her. After you. That's why she hid the truth." The brothers sat in silence, the weight of Ellen's words settling over them. Caleb's pencil moved at last, sketching the outline of a woman's face, Sarah, imagined from fragments of memory and pain. Noah reached for his hand, their fingers lacing together, their love a quiet strength. Back in Willow Creek, Lucas and Sam sat in the attic, surrounded by boxes of Claire's old things. They'd found more letters from Sarah, faded photos, a journal Claire had kept during the adoption process. The journal was raw, filled with fear and love, detailing her fight to keep the boys safe. One entry stood out, written in Claire's hurried scrawl, "If James finds them, he'll destroy them. I'll do anything to stop him. Anything." Lucas read the words aloud, his voice shaking. She was scared. Sam. Really scared. But what if she did more than she's saying? What if she hurt him to protect us? Sam shook his head, his eyes wide. She wouldn't. She's Ma. She loves us. But doubt lingered, a shadow neither could shake. When Ethan, Caleb, and Noah returned. The brothers gathered in the living room, sharing what they'd learned. Ellen's story matched Claire's, but James's words still echoed, a poison seeping into their trust. "We need to confront her," Ethan said, his voice resolute. "No more half-truths. We deserve the whole story." Caleb nodded, his sketchbook closed, his eyes on Noah. "But we do it together. As a family." Noah squeezed his hand, his voice soft but firm. "And we listen. Really listen. She's our mom. Whatever she did it for us." As they prepared to face Claire, the truth loomed closer, a fragile thread that could either bind them or break them. The past was unraveling, and with it, the family they'd always known. The living room was a battlefield of emotions as the brothers faced Claire, the weight of their discoveries pressing down. Ethan stood by the window, his arms crossed, his eyes hard. Caleb and Noah sat on the couch, their hands clasped, their love a quiet anchor. Lucas and Sam flanked them, the journal and letters spread out on the coffee table like evidence in a trial. Claire sat across from them, her face pale, her hands trembling in her lap. "Ma," Ethan began, his voice low but steady. "We talked to Ellen Ramsey. She told us about Sarah, about James, about the adoptions. But we need to hear it from you. Everything. No more secrets." Claire's eyes glistened, but she nodded. "I owe you that," she said, her voice raw. "I've always owed you that." She took a deep breath, her gaze distant, as if stepping back into a memory she'd tried to bury. "Sarah was my best friend. She was vibrant, funny, but so broken by James. He controlled every part of her life, her money, her choices. You boys. When she got pregnant with Ethan, then Caleb, then Noah, she tried to leave him, but he always pulled her back. The night she died, I was there to help her escape. We were packing her things, planning to get you boys out of foster care and start over." Her voice cracked, and she paused, wiping her eyes. But James came home. He was drunk, furious. He saw the bags, saw me, and he lost it. He hit Sarah, and she fell. I tried to pull him off, but he was too strong. She hit her head, and she didn't get up. I called the police, but James ran. They ruled it an accident, but I knew the truth. He killed her, even if the law didn't see it that way. Caleb's voice was soft, trembling. "Why didn't you tell us we were brothers? Why hide that?" Claire's eyes met his, filled with pain. "Because I wanted you to be free. Your mother's death, your father's violent seat was a weight I didn't want you to carry. I thought if you knew, it would define you. I wanted you to be my sons, not Sarah's tragedy." Noah squeezed Caleb's hand, his voice steady. "But we're not just yours, Ma. We're hers too. And each other's. We deserve to know." Claire nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I was wrong. I thought I was protecting you. But I was protecting myself too. From the guilt. From the fear that you'd hate me for what I couldn't do for not saving her." Lucas leaned forward, his voice sharp. "And James, why'd he say you had something to do with her death?" Claire's breath hitched. Because he blames me. He always has. I was there. I fought him. I called the police. He thinks if I hadn't helped Sarah, she'd still be alive. But I didn't hurt her. I swear it. Sam, who'd been silent, spoke up, his voice small. But you changed our names. Hit us. Did you do something else to keep him away? Claire's eyes widened, and for a moment, fear flashed across her face. I paid him, she admitted, her voice barely audible. After Sarah died, he found me, threatened to take you boys back. I didn't have much, but I gave him everything I had to make him disappear. It wasn't legal, but it worked. He left. Until now. The room fell silent, the weight of her confession settling over them. Ethan's fists clenched, his voice low. You paid him off. With what? Your savings. Your life. Claire nodded, her voice breaking. Everything. I'd do it again if it meant keeping you safe. Caleb stood, pulling Noah with him, his eyes glistening. We need time, Ma, to process this, to figure out who we are now. Noah nodded, his hand tight in Caleb's. But we're still a family. That doesn't change. As the brothers left the room, Claire sat alone, the journal open before her, its pages a testament to her love and her mistakes. The truth was out, but the healing was just beginning. And somewhere, out in the world, James Carver was still a shadow, waiting to cast his darkness over them all. The summer sun hung low over Willow Creek, casting golden light through the windows of Claire's house. The brothers had spent days wrestling with the truth, their hearts torn between love for Claire and the pain of her secrets. But today, they gathered in the backyard, the air thick with the scent of grass and the promise of closure. It was time to decide who they were together. Ethan stood by the old oak tree, his arms crossed, his eyes softer than they'd been in days. We've got the truth now, he said, his voice steady. Sarah, James, mate's all out. But what do we do with it? Caleb sat on the grass, Noah's head resting on his shoulder, their hands entwined. We move forward, Caleb said, his voice quiet but firm. We're brothers' blood or not. Ma's our mom. That's what matters. Noah nodded, his eyes on the horizon. I don't care about James. He's not our family. But Sarah, I want to honor her. To know her, even if it's just through stories. Lucas, leaning against the fence, held up Claire's journal. This has her in it. Sarah. Ma wrote about her laugh, her dreams, her fight. We can start there. Sam, sitting cross-legged beside him, looked up, his voice small but hopeful. And we stay together. Right. No matter what. Ethan's gaze softened, and he nodded. No matter what. Claire stepped out onto the porch, her face lined with exhaustion, but her eyes bright with hope. She'd spent the night reading her own journal, reliving the pain and love that had shaped their family. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. For the secrets, for the choices I made. But I'd do it all again to have you here, with me. Caleb stood, pulling Noah with him, and crossed the yard to hug her. We know, Ma. We're not going anywhere. Noah joined them, his arms wrapping around both. You gave us a home. A family. That's more than Sarah could. More than James ever would. Lucas and Sam followed, their embrace a quiet promise. Ethan hesitated, his heart still wrestling with anger. But he stepped forward, pulling Claire into a fierce hug. You're our mom, he said, his voice rough. Always will be. As they stood together, the weight of the past began to lift, replaced by something stronger: love, resilience, the unbreakable bond of family. They'd faced the truth about Sarah's death, James's shadow, and Claire's sacrifices, and they'd chosen each other. Days later, they held a small ceremony by the river, a tribute to Sarah. Caleb read a poem he'd written, his words weaving her memory into their lives not as a tragedy, but as a spark that had led them to Claire. Noah scattered wildflowers into the water, his hand in Caleb's, their love a quiet rebellion against the pain of the past. Lucas and Sam shared stories from Claire's journal, piecing together the woman who'd given them life. Ethan stood watch, his heart finally at peace, knowing they were whole. Claire watched her boys, her heart full. She'd made mistakes, carried guilt, but she'd also built something beautiful, a family that could weather any storm. The secret of their blood had been exposed, but it hadn't broken them. It had made them stronger. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the brothers stood together, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. They were Ethan, Caleb, Noah, Lucas, and Samson's brothers, lovers, survivors. And Claire was their mother, the heart of a family forged not just by blood, but by choice. The shadow of James Carver lingered, a distant threat, but it no longer held power. They'd faced the truth, embraced their love, and chosen their future. Together, they were unstoppable,